The grand chamber of the Galactic Concordat was a space carved from silence and starlight, a testament to an age of unity that felt increasingly fragile. Its walls were not built, but grown from living crystal that pulsed with the soft, captured light of 1,000 suns, each point of light a member species, each glimmer a vote in the grand calculus of cosmic stability. At its center, suspended in a field of gently shifting gravity, floated the dais of deliberation, where the designated speakers of the galaxy's elder races convened. Today, however, the light within the chamber seemed dimmed, the crystalline walls absorbing more than they reflected, as if the very architecture of their union was weary. The silence was not one of peace, but of profound and suffocating tension, a vacuum filled only by the unspoken anxieties of beings who had witnessed epochs rise and fall. The subject of this dread was, as it had been for cycles, a species that had no seat upon the dais, no light upon the walls, and no voice in the chorus of galactic governance: humanity. They were a specter, a name whispered in the hallowed halls they were forbidden to enter. Earth was banned, its people isolated, its star system a quarantined enigma, and in their silence they had grown into something terrifying. The first to break the stillness was the venerable adjudicator of the Cathar Imperium, a being whose form was a cascade of iridescent armored plates that chimed softly with every controlled movement. Its voice, a series of resonant harmonic tones, filled the chamber, each note heavy with the weight of history. The silence from the Sol sector persists. Our deepest sensor arrays, those that skirt the very edge of the quarantine zone, report nothing. No transmissions. No energy signatures beyond the expected output of a star. It is an unnatural calm, a void where there should be the noise of a civilization. For a species as volatile and ambitious as the humans, such quiet is not a sign of peace, but of a deeply held breath before a terrible storm. The Cathar's multifaceted eyes, swirling pools of liquid gold, scanned the faces of the other delegates, seeking agreement or perhaps absolution for the fear that dripped from its elegant words. Across the dais, the prime emissary of the Cygnian ascendancy, a tall, willowy being of solidified light and energy, flickered in response. Its form, usually a serene column of blue incandescence, was agitated, its edges shimmering with faint, violet sparks of concern. Unnatural, yes, adjudicator. Its voice was a soft, synthesized chime that resonated directly in the minds of those present, a telepathic murmur that could not be misconstrued. They were banned for their inherent chaos, their frightening capacity for both creation and self-destruction. We voted, all of us, to sever them from the galactic community, to protect them from us and us from them. We deemed them too young, too emotionally unstable to wield the technologies they were so rapidly discovering. We feared they would fracture the delicate peace we have maintained for millennia. The emissary paused, its light dimming for a moment as if in introspection. We expected them to falter, to collapse inward under the weight of their own contradictions. We anticipated a plea for re-entry, a cry for help. Instead, there is only this profound, unnerving silence. What have they been doing out there, alone in the dark? A low, guttural rumble emanated from the shadowed alcove where the representative of the Gorlog hegemony sat. The Gorlog was a creature of stone and sinew, its massive form a monument to a species that had clawed its way to sentience on a world of crushing gravity and brutal competition. Its voice was like the grinding of tectonic plates, slow and inexorable. They are building. That is what they do. They build things they do not understand, things that unravel the fabric of what is possible. When we first encountered them, they had just split the atom, a feat that had taken most of us centuries of careful philosophical deliberation. They did it in a handful of their frantic, short years, and immediately used it to incinerate their own cities. We saw this, and we recoiled. We saw a species that ran where others walked, a fire that threatened to consume the ancient, dry forest of our established order. The Gorlog shifted its immense weight, the gravity field around the dais groaning in protest. We banned them from this council, stripped them of their access to the galactic networks, and forbade any contact. We built a wall around their star. We thought we were containing a threat. But what if we only gave them a crucible? What if we forced them to temper their chaotic energies into a weapon aimed not at themselves, but at us? The chamber fell silent again, the weight of the Gorlog's words settling upon them all. He spoke a truth they had all secretly harbored. The ban was meant to be a corrective measure, a paternales. Tick act of cosmic stewardship. But it had been born of fear. They feared humanity's speed, their relentless, almost desperate drive to innovate, to expand, to become. While the elder races measured progress in geologic time, humanity measured it in heartbeats. They had witnessed humanity's brief, violent history, broadcasted unwittingly into the cosmos, a chaotic symphony of war and love, of art and atrocity. It was a history that was both beautiful and horrifying in its intensity, and the Concordat, in its ancient, cautious wisdom, had judged it too dangerous to be allowed to mingle with the placid currents of galactic society. "Their isolation has been absolute," commented the Silan matriarch, her voice a gentle, rustling whisper like leaves in a phantom wind. Her people were symbiotic plant beings, their forms an elegant fusion of cellulose and consciousness, their thoughts as slow and deliberate as the growth of a mighty tree. For generations, they have been alone, without the guidance of the elder races, without the tempering influence of the Concordat's laws, without access to the shared knowledge of the galactic archives. They have been forced to chart their own course, to solve their own existential crises. What kind of philosophy would be born from such profound solitude? What manner of civilization would emerge from a species that believes itself to be utterly alone in a hostile universe? This was the core of their fear. It was not the thought of human warships appearing on their borders. It was the unknown quality of the human spirit, forged in isolation. They had taken a volatile element and sealed it in a pressure vessel. They had no idea what would emerge when the seal was finally broken. The Concordat had built its peace on the principles of shared knowledge, of careful, incremental progress, of a universal understanding of the laws of physics and the ethics of existence. Humanity had been denied all of this. They would have had to derive their own understanding of the cosmos, their own morality, their own purpose. And the results of that solitary journey were a complete and terrifying mystery. The Cathar adjudicator signaled for the central hololith to be activated. The air above the dais shimmered, and a three-dimensional map of the galaxy bloomed into existence, a swirling vortex of stars and nebulae. A small, unremarkable yellow star on one of the outer spiral arms was highlighted in a soft, cautionary red. The Sol system. "Our long-range observatories have detected anomalies," the adjudicator stated, its voice tight with controlled urgency. "Not fleets, not weapons fire. Something far more subtle, and perhaps more disturbing. Gravitational distortions that do not align with any known natural phenomena. Faint, fleeting energy readings that defy our understanding of drive systems. And whispers, picked up by our most sensitive deep space arrays, of subspace echoes that seem to suggest a network of something. Something vast and interconnected, operating on principles we cannot decipher." The prime emissary's light pulsed with a nervous energy. "You are suggesting they have developed their own form of faster-than-light travel, and a communication system to match? Impossible. The principles of hyperspace mechanics are incredibly complex. It took my own people thousands of years of collaborative research with the Cathar to develop a stable drive. The humans could not have accomplished this on their own." "Could they not?" the Gorlog rumbled. "They split the atom in less than a century of knowing it existed. Their minds do not work like ours. They do not see boundaries, they see challenges. They do not accept limitations, they shatter them. We gave them a wall, and they have likely spent every moment since learning how to tear it down, or worse, how to build something on the other side of it that makes our wall irrelevant." The debate continued, a slow, circular dance of fear and speculation. They were the most powerful beings in the galaxy, the architects of an era of unprecedented peace, and they were paralyzed by the silence of a single primitive species they had cast out into the wilderness. They had called them barbarians, children playing with fire. They had deemed them unworthy of a place among the stars. The great irony, which was lost on none of them, was that in their attempt to control humanity, they had lost all control. They had created a blind spot in their own omniscience, a variable in their carefully balanced equation, and it was now the single greatest threat to their stability. The Silan matriarch extended a delicate, vine-like tendril toward the hololith, her touch causing the red-highlighted system to pulse. "There is only one way to resolve this uncertainty," she whispered, her voice carrying a profound sense of resignation. "We have debated their silence for too long. We have allowed our fear to fester in the darkness they have created. It is time to pierce that darkness. It is time to see what has grown in the garden we walled off." A heavy silence descended upon the chamber once more. The proposal was both logical and terrifying. To send a delegation, a first contact mission in reverse, to the very species they had excommunicated. It was a violation of their own most sacred law, the quarantine of Sol. But the alternative, to wait in ignorance for the inevitable storm to break, was becoming increasingly untenable. Finally, the Cathar adjudicator's armored plates clattered in a gesture of grim assent. "The matriarch is correct. The risk of inaction now outweighs the risk of action. We must know. We must understand what they have become." It turned its golden, multifaceted gaze upon the other members of the dais. "We will assemble a delegation, a vessel crewed by representatives from each of our founding races. It will be a mission of observation, of diplomacy, if diplomacy is even possible. We will approach with caution, with the full might of the Concordat fleet held in reserve, but we will approach." The prime emissary's light stabilized, solidifying into a determined, unwavering blue. "I will go. My people excel in communication, in understanding the nuances of first contact. If there is a way to reason with them, I will find it." The Gorlog let out a low, rumbling sigh that sounded like stone settling deep within the earth. "And I will go. If reason fails, they must understand the strength they would be facing. They must see the consequence of aggression." The decision was made. A single vessel, a ship of peace backed by the unspoken threat of annihilation, would journey to the Forbidden Star. It would cross the boundary that had been held for centuries, and it would deliver a message to the silent, watching inhabitants of Earth. The Concordat was coming, and the galaxy held its breath, waiting to see what would answer the knock on the door they had sealed so long ago. They had banned Earth from their council, from their society, from their very reality. But they were beginning to suspect, with a cold, creeping certainty that chilled them to their very core, that humanity hadn't simply been waiting in their solitary confinement. They had been building something of their own, an empire of the silent, an empire of the banned. The vessel designated for the journey was the Stellar Vigilance, a ship that was less a war machine and more a moving cathedral of diplomacy. It was a product of the Concordat's highest ideals, a seamless fusion of the aesthetics and technologies of the founding races. Its hull was a polished, obsidian shard of Cathar design, built to withstand the rigors of deep space and the gaze of hostile stars. Its interior was a labyrinth of serene, light-filled chambers conceived by the Signians, designed to calm the most agitated of minds. And its core systems, its engines and its sensors, were imbued with the rugged, indomitable resilience of the Gorlog. On its bridge, the three delegates stood as a living embodiment of the Council's will. The prime emissary, a beacon of ethereal blue light. The Gorlog commander, a mountain of quiet, watchful granite. And leading them, chosen for her unique blend of analytical prowess and diplomatic acumen, was a Cathar strategist named Lyrazel. Her carapace was a deep, lustrous indigo, and her golden eyes held a sharpness that missed nothing. Their journey to the edge of the Sol quarantine zone was conducted in a state of high alert and profound silence. The crew, a hand-picked selection of the finest officers from across the Concordat, moved with a quiet efficiency, their faces masks of professional calm that did not quite conceal the tension coiling in the air. They were venturing into the unknown, into a place that had been mythologized for generations as a pit of chaos, a failed experiment in sentience. As they approached the invisible line drawn in space so long ago, the ship's sophisticated sensors began to feed a stream of bewildering data to the bridge's main view screen. Commander Lyrazel, the chief science officer, a Scylan whose mind was directly interfaced with the ship's systems, reported in its whispering, rustling voice. "I am detecting structures in orbit around the primary star. They are not planets, they are artificial, but their scale it is not logical." On the view screen, the image of the Sol system resolved from a simple stellar map into a breathtaking, terrifying reality. Surrounding the yellow star was not a collection of ships or space stations as they had anticipated. It was a ring, a vast, impossibly thin, and perfectly constructed ring that glinted in the starlight, encircling its sun like a halo of creation. It was a megastructure, a feat of engineering so far beyond the Concordat's capabilities that it bordered on the fantastical. Strewn throughout the system, in stable orbits around the planets, were other, smaller constructs, glittering webs of light and matter, orbital tats and platforms of staggering size and complexity. The system was not silent and empty. It was teeming with a silent, industrious civilization that had rebuilt its world not on a planet, but in the fabric of space itself. The bridge of the Stellar Vigilance was plunged into a stunned silence. The Gorlog commander let out a low, involuntary growl of disbelief. The prime emissary's light flickered violently, a sign of extreme shock and cognitive dissonance. Lyrazel stood perfectly still, her multifaceted eyes processing the impossible image before her. This was not the work of a primitive species that had been languishing in isolation. This was the work of masters. "They have harvested their entire asteroid belt," the Scylan science officer murmured, its voice filled with a reverence that bordered on fear. "And several of their smaller moons. The material mass required for this, it is astronomical. They have remade their system. Before Lyrazel could issue an order, a new alert chimed through the bridge, a calm, clear tone that was starkly different from their own urgent alarms. "We are being hailed," the communications officer announced, her voice trembling slightly. "It is audio and video, clear, unencrypted, standard galactic diplomatic frequencies." Lyrazel's mind raced. They had expected silence or perhaps a warning shot, not a polite, standard hail. It was unnervingly civilized. "On screen," she commanded, her own voice a carefully controlled, resonant chord. The image of the Sol system vanished, replaced by the face of a human. He was an older male, his hair gray at the temples, his face lined with the faint creases of age and thought. He wore a simple dark blue uniform devoid of any rank insignia or ostentatious decoration. Behind him was not the bridge of a warship, but a room that looked like a library or a study, with shelves of what appeared to be physical books lining the wall. The man's expression was calm, his eyes patient and intelligent. There was no hint of aggression, no sign of fear. There was only a profound and unsettling serenity. "This is Administrator Jensen of the Sol Coalition," the human said, his voice smooth and measured, his pronunciation of the galactic standard tongue flawless. "We have been expecting you. Welcome to the Sol system. Your journey was tracked from the moment you entered the Uit cloud. We appreciate you respecting the quarantine line. Please hold your position and we can begin our discussion." The sheer audacity of the statement, delivered with such placid confidence, sent another shockwave through the bridge. "We have been expecting you." They had believed their approach was stealthy, that they held the element of surprise. They had come as explorers to a lost world, only to find the inhabitants waiting for them on the porch, a pot of tea already brewing. Lyrazel took a moment to compose herself, her training as a Cathar strategist taking over. She had to recalibrate every assumption, every preconceived notion. These were not the chaotic barbarians of the historical records. "This is Commander Lyrazel of the Concordat vessel Stellar Vigilance," she responded, her voice equally steady. "We are a diplomatic delegation from the Galactic Concordat. Our mission is one of peaceful inquiry." The human Jensen offered a small, almost imperceptible smile. "Inquiry. A good word. You have questions, I am sure. After all, you have left us to our own devices for quite some time. It is only natural to be curious about the results." He gestured to something off-screen. "We understand your caution. However, for a true discussion to take place, we believe it is best conducted face-to-face. We have a station prepared for you on the inner ring, a neutral environment designed for diplomatic exchange. We invite you to be our guests. Your vessel will be safe here. We give you our word." The Gorlog commander stepped forward, his heavy presence a silent challenge. "You expect us to disarm ourselves and enter your territory based on the word of a species with your history," he rumbled, his voice laced with suspicion. Jensen's gaze shifted to the Gorlog, his calm expression unwavering. "Commander of the Gorlog hegemony," he said, correctly identifying the species without being told. "Your history is one of conquest and dominance born from a world of scarcity, yet you now stand as a pillar of galactic peace. My history, our history, is one of chaos and conflict, yes. But it is also a history of learning from that chaos. We do not ask you to trust our history. We ask you to trust what you are seeing now. A civilization that has had centuries to reflect on its past mistakes and to build a future free of them. Your vessel is a symbol of diplomacy. Bring your guards if you must, but we believe you will find them unnecessary." The prime emissary flickered, its telepathic voice entering Lyrazel's mind. "His logic is sound, Commander. His demeanor is not that of a deceiver. There is a depth to him, a stillness that speaks of immense confidence, not arrogance. They know we have a fleet waiting just beyond the system. An overt act of aggression against us would be illogical." Lyrazel weighed the options. To refuse would be an insult and would end any chance of a peaceful resolution. To accept was a calculated risk, a step into the lair of a creature she was only beginning to understand. But Jensen was right. What they were seeing with their own eyes was a more powerful argument than any historical text. The evidence of a mature, advanced, and incredibly powerful civilization was all around them. A civilization that had not expanded outwards in a wave of conquest, but had instead turned inward, rebuilding their own home with a level of mastery that was humbling. "We accept your invitation, Administrator Jensen," Lyrazel said, the decision made. "Send us the coordinates. We will proceed to the designated station." The human nodded, the small, serene smile returning to his lips. "Excellent. We look forward to the conversation. It has been a long time coming." The screen went blank, leaving the bridge crew of the Stellar Vigilance in a state of profound and uneasy silence. The image of the great solar ring burned into their minds. They had come seeking answers about a primitive, exiled race. They were about to become the students of an empire they never knew existed. The shuttle that carried them from the Stellar Vigilance to the designated point on the solar ring was a study in minimalist perfection. It had no visible control interfaces, no blinking lights, no sense of mechanical effort. It was a smooth, silent pod that detached from their vessel and moved through the vacuum with a grace that defied their understanding of propulsion. As they approached the megastructure, its true scale became overwhelming. The ring was a world in itself, a band of silver and green and blue that stretched beyond the horizon in both directions, its inner surface a breathtaking panorama of engineered landscapes, sprawling cities of elegant, crystalline towers, and vast, open parks under the simulated light of an artificial sky. It was a habitat for what must have been trillions of souls, all living in a state of post-scarcity splendor that the Concordat, for all its power, had never achieved. They were met not by soldiers in armor, but by a small group of humans in simple, academic-looking robes. There were no weapons, no security checkpoints, no intrusive scans. They were led through corridors that were more like art galleries, their walls displaying dynamic, shifting patterns of light and color. The air was clean and fresh, filled with the scent of growing things. It was a place of profound peace, a peace that was so absolute it felt more intimidating than any fortress. The diplomatic chamber was a circular room with a transparent ceiling that looked directly up at the distant, brilliant sun. At its center was a simple, round table made of a warm, dark wood. Administrator Jensen was waiting for them, and with him were two other humans, a woman with keen, intelligent eyes, and a man whose face held the quiet wisdom of a scholar. "Welcome," Jensen said, his voice as calm and measured as it had been on the view screen. "I am pleased you chose to trust us. Please sit. Let us begin this long-overdue conversation." As they took their seats, Lyrazel, the Cathar strategist, felt a sense of profound dislocation. Everything she had been trained to expect, every tactical scenario she had prepared for, was useless here. She was not on a battlefield or a hostile negotiation table. She was a guest in a place that felt more like a monastery than the heart of a burgeoning empire. "You have remade your world," she began, her voice a low, resonant tone. This is beyond anything we thought possible. Why did you not reveal this? Why the silence?" The woman who introduced herself as Dr. Eris Thorne, a specialist in xenohistory and social dynamics, answered. "Because we were not ready, and with respect, neither were you. When you quarantined us, you did so out of fear. You saw our rapid, chaotic development, and you saw a threat. You were not wrong. We were a threat mostly to ourselves. The ban, the isolation, it was the greatest gift you could have ever given us." This statement hung in the air, a complete inversion of everything the Concordat believed. "A gift," the Gorlog commander grumbled, his skepticism palpable. "We condemned you to solitude." "Exactly," Jensen replied, leaning forward slightly. "You forced us to look inward. Without the temptation of galactic expansion, without the conflicts that would inevitably arise from contact with other species, we were forced to solve our own problems. We had to cure our own diseases, both biological and societal. We had to unify our people, not through conquest, but through a shared sense of purpose. We had to confront the darkness within our own nature, the very chaos you feared, and learn to master it." The third human, a historian named Kenji Tanaka, spoke for the first time, his voice soft but clear. "Our history is filled with what we call great filters, moments of existential crisis where a civilization either overcomes a challenge or perishes. Nuclear annihilation, ecological collapse, societal division. We came perilously close to failing at every one. The quarantine was our final, unexpected great filter. It presented us with a choice: languish in resentment and eventually destroy ourselves, or use the isolation to become something better, to become worthy of the stars we were forbidden to touch." Lyrazel processed this, her analytical mind piecing together the implications. They had not been idle. They had been engaged in the most ambitious project of all, the complete and total reformation of their own species. They had treated their own chaotic nature as an engineering problem, and they had solved it. "This structure," she said, gesturing to the world around them, "this empire you have built, it is not an empire of conquest, then. It is an empire of stability." "Precisely," Dr. Thorne affirmed. "We achieved a unified consciousness not through psionic means, but through a shared ethical framework. We eliminated scarcity through total energy mastery. We eliminated conflict by addressing its root causes: fear, want, and ignorance. We did not build this ring as a fortress. We built it as a cradle, a place for our species to mature. The prime emissary, which had been silent until now, pulsed with a soft, inquisitive light. Its telepathic voice filled the room, gentle but probing. And your technology, the gravitational anomalies, the subspace network, you developed all of this in secret, in isolation. Jensen nodded. Our science took a different path. Without access to your galactic archives, we were not bound by your established theories. We approached the universe with fresh eyes. We did not learn to travel through hyperspace. We learned to fold space-time itself. We do not communicate across subspace. We are entangled with it. Our technology is a reflection of our philosophy. It is about harmony, not force. We do not brute force our way through the universe. We move with its natural currents. This was the great reveal, the moment that shifted the balance of power in the galaxy, not with a bang, but with a quiet, earth-shattering statement. The humans had not just caught up to the Concordat. They had surpassed them in a way they couldn't even fully comprehend. Their technology was not an iteration of known principles. It was a completely different paradigm, born from a completely different way of thinking. The Concordat had built a faster horse. The humans had invented the automobile. The Gorlog commander seemed to deflate slightly, the aggressive posture he had maintained since their arrival softening into one of stunned contemplation. "So, what now?" he asked, his voice losing its usual gravelly edge. "You hold this power, you have this empire. Why reveal yourselves now? What do you want from us?" It was Jensen who answered, his gaze sweeping over the three delegates, his calm eyes holding a weight that seemed to contain centuries of silent patience. "We want nothing from you. Not your technology, not your territory, not your resources. We have everything we need right here." He paused, letting the statement sink in. "We invited you here not to intimidate you, but to inform you, to re-establish contact on our own terms as equals. The child you sent to its room has grown up. We are ready to rejoin the galactic conversation, but not as supplicants, and not as members of your Concordat." Lyrazel felt a chill run through her crystalline form, a feeling akin to the human emotion of dread. "What are you saying?" "We are saying," Jensen continued, his voice calm but resolute, "that Earth was banned from the Council, so we made our own. An empire not of planets, but of a people, a coalition of a unified humanity, and we are here to extend an offer of open dialogue, of shared knowledge, of mutual respect. But we will not be governed, we will not be judged, we will be partners or we will be strangers once more. The choice is yours." The three delegates were silent, the magnitude of the situation pressing down on them. They had come here expecting to deal with a prodigal son, a wayward child to be disciplined or, perhaps, welcomed back into the fold. Instead, they had found a peer, a calm, logical, and ethically grounded power whose capabilities were, in many ways, superior to their own. The balance of the galaxy had just been irrevocably altered. Humanity was no longer a problem to be solved. They were a force to be reckoned with, a force that had chosen peace over war, introspection over expansion, and wisdom over power. But the offer of partnership felt like an ultimatum, delivered with the serene confidence of a species that knew it had nothing to f. The Concordat had prided itself on its wisdom, on its careful stewardship of the galaxy. But in their fear, they had made a mistake that had echoed through the centuries. They had cast out what they could not understand, and in doing so, they had inadvertently created their greatest challenge, and perhaps their only hope for a future they could not yet imagine. The conversation was just beginning, but the old order was already dead. The revelations of that first meeting sent ripples of shock and disbelief through the highest echelons of the Galactic Concordat. The delegation's report, a meticulously detailed account of the Sol Coalition's technological prowess, social cohesion, and philosophical maturity, was met with a mixture of awe and deep-seated terror. The hololiths in the Grand Chamber replayed the images of the solar ring, the serene cities, and the calm, confident faces of the human administrators over and over, as the elder races struggled to reconcile this new reality with their centuries of ingrained prejudice. The humans were not barbarians. They were, in many ways, an idealized version of what the Concordat itself aspired to be, a society that had transcended internal conflict and dedicated itself to the pursuit of knowledge and enlightenment. They had achieved this not through the Concordat's guidance, but in spite of its absence. A new era of diplomacy began, cautious and tentative at first, but gradually growing in trust and mutual understanding. Human vessels, sleek, silent ships that moved through space with the impossible grace of their fold-drive technology, began to appear in Concordat systems, not as conquerors, but as observers and emissaries. They shared their knowledge freely, offering insights into physics that overturned millennia of established scientific dogma. They provided medical technologies that could repair cellular decay, effectively ending old age for any species that chose to accept the gift. They offered solutions to ecological crises on developing worlds, using their mastery of environmental engineering to restore dying planets. They asked for nothing in return. This, more than anything, was what baffled and unsettled the Concordat. Their society was built on a complex web of trade, of favors, of mutual obligation. The Gorlog understood power, the Cathar understood strategy, the Signians understood influence. None of them truly understood altruism on a galactic scale. Humanity's motives remained inscrutable, their generosity a puzzle that the ancient, cynical minds of the Council could not solve. They were ethical to a degree that seemed almost inhuman. Their logic was unassailable, their calm unshakable. In every interaction, they were the epitome of the enlightened elder race they themselves had once been denied. Lyrazel found herself at the forefront of this new relationship, acting as the primary liaison between the Concordat and the Sol Coalition. She spent more time in the serene, light-filled halls of the solar ring than she did in the crystalline chamber of her own people. She developed a professional respect, and even a strange, unfamiliar sense of friendship with Administrator Jensen and his team. She learned of their history, not from the biased archives of the Concordat, but from their own records, the centuries of struggle, of near extinction, and the slow, arduous process of building their new world, which they simply called the Commons. We learned that the pursuit of empire of galactic territory is a fool's errand, Jensen explained to her one day, as they stood on an observation deck overlooking a vast, engineered forest, the earth a beautiful blue and white marble hanging in the artificial sky above them. The universe is infinite. There will always be more planets, more stars, more resources. The only thing that is finite is a species' potential for wisdom. We chose to focus on cultivating the infinite within ourselves, rather than conquering the finite without. This philosophy was the bedrock of their new civilization. They had turned the very concept of empire on its head. Theirs was not an empire of land, but an empire of intellect and ethics. It was this realization that finally allowed the Concordat to lower its guard, to begin to see humanity not as a rival, but as a potential partner in the truest sense of the word. An alliance began to form, an unprecedented union between the old power and the new, between the cautious, slow-moving Concordat and the dynamic, enlightened Sol Coalition. The ban on Earth became a footnote in history, a cautionary tale of fear and misjudgment that was taught to the young of all species. A new age of cooperation and discovery was dawning. It was during a joint scientific expedition, a mission to map a previously unexplored nebula on the farthest edge of the galaxy, that the true, final twist in the cosmic narrative was revealed. The mission was a symbol of the new alliance, crewed by both conquered. Inhuman scientists, aboard a human vessel, the Horizon, a ship whose sensors could perceive the universe in ways the Concordat's finest instruments could not. Dr. Aris Thorne was leading the human contingent, while Lyrazel was present as a Concordat observer, her strategic mind fascinated by the humans' methods of exploration. They were charting gravitational anomalies within the nebula, anomalies that the humans believed were not caused by stellar remnants or dark matter, but by something far older. Their full drive allowed them to make micro-jumps within the dense gas clouds, taking readings with a precision that was previously unimaginable. It was on the third day of their survey that they found it. Administrator, Dr. Thorne's voice was a whisper of pure awe, broadcast from the Horizon Science Lab to Jensen and the Concordat High Council, who were observing the mission remotely. We have found the source of the anomalies. It is, I don't have the words. The main view screen in the Sol diplomatic chamber, where Jensen sat, and in the Concordat's grand chamber, where the delegates watched with rapt attention, flickered to life with the Horizon's forward sensor feed. The image that appeared silenced them all, a sight so vast and so alien that it defied all context. It was a structure, but to call it a structure was like calling a galaxy a rock. It was a latticework of crystalline filaments and dark, unknown matter that dwarfed the nebula itself. It was a web of impossible geometry, stretching for light years in every direction, a cosmic artifact of such scale and complexity that it could only be the work of a type III civilization, a being or beings that could harness the entire energy output of a galaxy. It was ancient, its surface pitted with the impact craters of stray comets over billions of years, and it was utterly, profoundly dead. A silent, abandoned megastructure that made the humans' own impressive solar ring look like a child's toy. But that was not the most shocking discovery. As the horizon moved closer, its sensors began to decipher a faint, repeating signal emanating from the heart of the colossal artifact. It was not a message of greeting, nor a distress call. It was a warning. A simple, terrifying message, translated by the human ship's advanced linguistic computers from a mathematical language so old it was practically a part of the universe's background radiation. Jensen read the translated text aloud, his calm, measured voice for the first time filled with a note of profound, chilling gravity. The message repeats on a loop. It says, "They are coming. We built this to stop them. We failed. Silence is the only sanctuary. Do not speak into the dark." A cold, absolute dread settled upon both the human and concordat chambers. The great filters, the existential crises, they had all been looking inward at the challenges a species creates for itself. They had never truly considered that the greatest filter of all might be an external one. The silence in the universe, the famous paradox of why they had never encountered other advanced civilizations, suddenly had a horrifying potential answer. It wasn't that they weren't out there. It was that the ones who had survived had learned to be quiet. And humanity, in its brief, boisterous history, had been shouting into the cosmos for centuries with its radio waves, its television broadcasts, its clumsy, noisy exploration of its own solar system. And now, allied with the Concordat, they were poised to step out into the galaxy in a way they never had before, with a voice louder than ever. The Gorlog commander voiced the thought that was in everyone's mind, his deep rumble trembling with a fear he had never before known. What are they? What could extinguish a civilization that could build that? No one had an answer. The ancient signal was the only clue, a final, desperate message from a long-dead civilization of unimaginable power. They had faced a threat so great it had erased them from existence, and their last act was to warn those who would come after to stay hidden, to stay silent. In that moment, the divisions between human and Cathar, Gorlog and Signian, Concordat and Coalition, all evaporated, rendered meaningless by a revelation that recontextualized their entire existence. They were not the masters of the galaxy, the inheritors of the cosmos. They were children playing in a dark forest who had just found a sign nailed to a tree written in the blood of giants. The sign read, "Beware the hunters." Lyrazel looked at the image of the dead, colossal structure, then at the calm, serious face of Administrator Jensen on the screen. The fear she felt was profound, but it was mingled with a new, powerful emotion, a sense of shared purpose that was deeper than any alliance of convenience. The humans, the species they had once feared for their chaos, had become the galaxy's bedrock of logic and reason, and now they would need every ounce. See of that calm, that methodical brilliance, to face a future that had suddenly become terrifyingly uncertain. "Your people have a phrase, I believe, Administrator," Lyrazel said, her voice resonating through the silent grand chamber. "The calm before the storm." Jensen met her gaze through the screen, his expression somber, but his eyes filled with a familiar, unwavering resolve. "Yes," he replied, "and it seems the sky is growing dark. We spent centuries learning to master ourselves, to create a stable and unified house. Now it appears we must prepare that house for a storm unlike any the galaxy has ever seen." The journey of humanity, from exiled pariah to enlightened leader, had reached its zenith, only to reveal that they stood upon the precipice of a much larger, darker stage. Their self-made empire, born from the ashes of their banishment, was no longer just a sanctuary for humanity. It was now, perhaps, the last and greatest hope for a galaxy that had just learned it was not alone, and that true silence was not a choice, but a means of survival. The future was unknown, the threat unimaginable, but for the first time they would not face it alone. They would face it together, a fragile union of old and new, standing in defiant, watchful silence against the vast, encroaching dark.